welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. Here's an example. I'm going to share in this video books by each of three naturalists: Jane Goodall, Gerald Durrell, and David Attenborough. Since learning about Jane Gooden's death on October 1st, 2025, at 91 and a half, I've been thinking about how Jane and Gerald and David have enriched my life. I'd like to say something about books each wrote. Jane's first book was My Friends, the Wild Chimpanzees. This was published in 1967 by the National Geographic Society. And I marvel at her detailed observations, the time that she spent, and observing and the time to record. Then later I came across this book. It was a book that was intended for 10 to 12-year-olds and up. I was an adult, but I was teaching 12-year-olds, 11 and 12-year-olds, and I started reading it, and I said, hey, this is great. So one thing leads to another. During those war years, I went to 3 different schools, a kindergarten, and the equivalents of your junior and senior high school. I never really liked any of them. I didn't mind the work. Some of it I liked very much, but I hated having to leave home every morning, and I hated having to spend time indoors when I wanted to be outside. I longed for each day to end so that I could go home to my family. Well, she's got this other thing is she has pets, and she's had the relationship with these different animals, and her mother recognizes that and supports it and will bring books home for her. She remembers one day my weekend library book Mom brought me, The Story of Dr. Dolittle by Hugh Lofting. I read it all the way through. Then I read it through again. I'd never before loved a book so much. I loved it. I read it a 3rd time before it had to go back. I finished it under the bedclothes with a flashlight after Mom had turned off the light. Well, that reminded me of a student I taught in grade 7. In one of her stories, she writes about just doing that same thing. Lights had been turned off in the room, but she used a flashlight to continue to read. Our oldest son read Story of Dr. Dolittle, but there's a dozen or so. He read them all in the series. So it brought back good memories to me as well as to how she first got interested. And she was 7 years old, and that was the first time that she decided that I must go to Africa someday. Now, she, on her own doing, she put together an Alligator Club magazine. It was filled with nature notes, drawings of insect anatomy, and other such things. So she was really, in many ways, following her passion and learning of things that she was keen on. Well, she did grow up and did end up going to Africa and got work there. And after 2 months, I met a man who made all my dreams come true. If you are interested in animals, someone told me, you must meet Louis Leakey. So he was an anthropologist down there, he and his wife, and she gets an appointment. I made an appointment, went to see him, and he offered me a job immediately. His secretary had just given her notice. What amazing luck. I think he would have found work for me anyway, because he was impressed by how much I knew about African animals through all her reading that she'd done. Now, Louis and his wife Mary are digging out away from town at Olduvai Gorge, and she accompanies him. And I had never been so happy. There I was, far, far from any human dwellings, out in the wilds of Africa, with animals all around me at night, in the night. Wild, free animals. That was what I dreamed of all my life. Well, Dr. Leakey plants a seed. He, in talking with her at one point, he says how wonderful it would be if someone could go and study the chimpanzees, observe and take detailed notes. Because I had no training, no degree, no experience, I had not imagined that I could be chosen for such a study. But of course, I desperately wanted to try. One day I told Louis so. "I've been waiting for you to tell me that," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Why did you think I talked about those chimpanzees to you?" He told me it didn't matter about my lack of experience or my lack of degree. He wanted to send someone who had a mind uncluttered by theories, someone who would watch carefully and record accurately. He preferred someone who truly wanted to live among the apes and learn about their behavior to someone who simply wanted an academic degree. Above all, he said he needed someone who had endless patience. One thing leads to another. Gerald Durrell was born in 1925 in India. His father was an engineer there. But his father died when he was not quite 3 years old. And his mother moved the 5 children back to England and London, and later she moved again down to Corfu. What a special place Corfu was for Gerald. The island was his school. Space was made for his collections, though his two brothers that were there and a sister that was there grumbled. His mother, now see, mothers, the importance of mothers. Mother supported his interests, and she found a man who lived in Corfu and was an accomplished scientist, and he mentored Gerald through traveling to different places, to learning things about taxonomy, and Gerald writes about this in his book, My Family and Other Animals. And because this environment was so compelling, so rich, he writes two other books about that as well. One of them seems aptly titled. It's called The Garden of the Gods. I've shown these books previously, but and well as a novel that takes set there called The Donkey Rustlers for teenagers or adults, and they moved back to England. And he gets a job. Well, let me read. Starts off, this is the very first of this neat book. They say that a child who aspires to be an engine driver very rarely grows up to fill that role in life. If this is so, then I am an exceptionally lucky person. At the age of 2, I made up my mind quite firmly and unequivocally that the only thing I wanted to do was to study animals. Nothing else interested me. I clung to this decision throughout my formative years with the tenacity of a limpet. Of course, he'd been on Corfu. He'd seen limpets when the tide's down. They seal themselves against the rocks until the tide comes back in. They don't want the birds to find easy pickings. From scorpions to eagle owls, monkeys to humble garden snail. Harassed by such a pageant of wildlife, my family comforted themselves with the thought that it's just a phase he's passing through, and I would soon grow out of it. But with each fresh acquisition, my interest in animals quickened and deepened until by my late teens I knew without a shadow of a doubt what I wanted to be. Simply, I wanted to become a collector of animals for zoos, and later on, when I'd made my fortune this way, to have a zoo of my own. Well, as many of you know, those things came to pass. One of the things that helped was that he got a job in a zoo, London Zoo, and I don't think it was called London Zoo, but he gets a job at the zoo, and there he has these, some of them quite a little bit close calls, but he learns firsthand about what's needed in caring for animals and the problems that they can have and how to help cure this. And so this is a fun book. This is called but before I go there, I wanted to mention that he does get a zoo of his own on Jersey Island, and he died in 1995 at the age of 70. David Attenborough is 99 and a half years old. Now, his first book was the Zoo Quest to Guyana, and I'll give you some chapter headings here: the savannas, the anacondas, and ant bears, and ants and sloths, there's birds. There's it's a rich accounting of this land's animal life, and in the back of the dust cover from the author, I read an advertisement for a talks producer on the BBC Sound Radio. I applied and was turned down. I thought at the time that this was very bad luck, but it wasn't. As a result of that application, I eventually gained a place on a training course for television producers. I found myself producing programs on an enormous variety of subjects. As a result of one of them, I met Jack Lester. One thing leads to another, who was then curator of reptiles at the London Zoo. Together, we hatched a scheme for a joint zoo BBC expedition to go to West Africa to film and collect animals. To our delight, the idea was accepted, and the resultant programs were sufficiently popular for us to be able to go together on another trip to South America, hence this book. Well, these three people have introduced me to wonders of our living planet. And I'm ever so thankful and grateful to them and to their wonderful writing. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.